There's been a lot of drama going on in the market recently with all the GameStop stuff that continues even until today, as well as crypto, Bitcoin, Ethereum, Bitcoin Cash, Ripple, and all these different cryptos experiencing booms in prices, as well as a lot of other drama going on in the stock market. A lot of people are coming to me being like, how do I get started? What's the first thing I should do? What are the steps to get into this stuff? So today we're gonna look at that. So I put together a little quick plan, 3 steps with 3 sub-steps each. And that should make things really kind of clear and simple to help you get on the right footing, get in the right position, so that you can start investing not only for the short term, but also for the long term, looking towards like buying a house or getting married or retiring or things like that. I think a lot of people have skipped building the foundational, like laying a groundwork, and they're just like, oh my gosh, crypto's going crazy, I better buy Bitcoin now, or everybody's buying GameStop, I better buy it now, or whatever. And if you don't take a minute to kind of figure out the starting point and your goals and things like that, you kind of end up just being pulled here and there by whatever you see in the news or whatever you see on Reddit, and you don't get sleep, and then it ends up being really like, you just get burnt out and frustrated and worried and scared all the time. But if you do it right, if you take each step slowly and you think them through, then actually investing for the future and growing your balance over the years is not actually like a hard prospect. So that's big step number 1. Get your foundation laid out. Figure out your finances. So sub-step number 1, so 1.1, is to figure out your budget. So do you know how much money you're receiving each month and how much money you're spending each month, including income from your main job, side gigs, like other things that you might have going on around the internet? Do you know how much money you're spending each month, including not just like rent and food and utilities and things like that, also entertainment, but also how much are you spending on the bigger things like car insurance or your car payment or house insurance or things like that? If you don't have a good grasp of the pluses and the minuses, it's gonna be hard for you to even figure out how much value you're getting from the stocks. So if you're used to getting 2,000 bucks a month and then you spend 1,500, you're left over with 500 bucks. But if somehow using investments, in a few years you can get that up to 1,000 bucks left over at the end of the month, that's really dope. You've doubled your leftover income. So laying down that kind of groundwork foundation of setting up a budget and figuring out your budget is step number 1. Step number 2, which connects with figuring out your budget, if you have any debt, especially credit card debt, which is the most expensive kind of debt, you need to get rid of that. Generally speaking, like in the stock market, you might see returns of higher than 20% over a month or over a half year or something like that. Generally speaking, you're not going to see that, especially over the long term. But on a credit card, it's really easy to spend to be losing 20% every single month on whatever balance you have on your credit card. So it's really important to pay that down as soon as possible, because if you're making 10% in the stock market and then losing 20 in credit cards, it's like you have risk in the stock market, but you don't have risk in a credit card. You know you absolutely have to lose 20% or somewhere thereabouts to be paying for that credit card. So if you pay that all down, it's basically like an automatic 20% return on interest, which you're not really ever guaranteed to get in the stock market or in crypto. And sub-step number 3 is to save up 3, if not 6 months worth of living expenses, just in case everything goes haywire, just in case you break your leg or your fridge blows up or something crazy happens. You can be like, yep, I got that, no problem. I'm not gonna lose sleep. I'm not gonna have to go out and get another job. Just have that money saved up before you get started. Because once you get started in the stock market, if you don't have that kind of safety nest egg on the side, it's going to be really, really stressful, especially if you see a big dip like what we saw last year in March, when things dropped 30-40% over a few days. And if that happened and that was the money you needed to live on, you'd be stressing like crazy, right? Especially if your job was going into jeopardy after that because of something like the pandemic, So get 3 months to 6 months, 3 months to 6 months stored up, kept in your bank account, and then you can start thinking about growing your money. Major step number 2 is to figure out your goals and figure out what kind of investing style is suitable for you. So inside your goals, thing to consider number 1 is how much cash do you have for investing. So we talked a minute ago about saving up 3 to 6 months worth of living expenses, putting that on the side. Now, how much do you have to actually invest? If you had 1 month of leftover money from the example we were using earlier, maybe $500, that's something you can use. And so if you have this 3 to 6 months worth saved up and put on the side, how much money do you have to invest? And also, are you going to be adding to that each month? Or maybe you just got an inheritance of $5,000 and you're gonna try and use that to grow over the years. Where does your cash flow, your salary, your income, and the amount of money that you have saved up, how does that all work out? And if you have a constant inflow of cash, maybe a few $100 a month, that you can put into investing, it basically makes the formula really easy. On the other hand, maybe you've lost your job, but maybe you successfully saved up $20,000. What's the best way you can use that money to grow and maybe live off of for a little while you're preparing to get a new job? Step number 2 is, what is your risk tolerance? And this is something that I think a lot of people haven't properly sat down to think about. When I first started investing, I didn't have much cash. And I thought my risk tolerance was a lot higher than it actually was. But let's say I put in my $500 into the stock market, I would be freaking out. Like every day I'd be like, dude, is it 490 now or is it 510? And if it was 510, I'd be like, oh my gosh, so I'm so safe. This is awesome. This is okay. And if it went down to 490, I'd be like, frig, dude, I just lost $10 and I didn't get anything for it, And that shows you your risk tolerance. And a lot of this is just like your character and your personality. I think a lot of us tend to be risk takers even when we're young, and a lot of us tend to be very cautious, very kind of controlled and not very adventurous, even from when we're young, and you can learn how to be one or the other, but it takes a lot of work. So you need to figure out your risk tolerance. And if you're kind of like, I'd rather not, risk losing much, then the commensurate return to that is going to be a little bit lower. If you're on the other side of the fence and you're like, dude, I have all this money, I'm going to put it in and I don't care if it goes to zero, you might be able to get into things where in a year by now they've doubled or tripled, but the amount of risk you're going to be taking on always offers a greater reward as well as a greater negative. And so you need to figure that out for yourself. A lot of people have been asking me about crypto. A lot of people have been asking me about GameStop even. And these are like not things that you can just put your money in and be like, it's going to be fine for the next 20 years. Like putting your money in like Walmart or something, or Visa or something like that would be basically like if you just put your deposit on auto deposit, $100 a month forever, just going into Visa, it's going to grow. It's probably not going to shrink, but it's not going to grow that crazy. But on the flip side, you could do the same thing with Bitcoin, and it's at 50 grand right now per Bitcoin. It could be 15 grand in a few days. Can you handle that? Are you comfortable with that? And then step number 3, how much time do you have to focus on the market each day? For some of us, for myself, I like to spend, I'm probably looking at news, looking at brokerages, looking at my crypto accounts and stuff like that, an hour or 2 a day, doing research and putting videos together. And that's become part of my job for this channel. But I think a lot of people are actually quite busy with work, taking care of the kids, they got Netflix or whatever other hobbies are going on. If you're on a sports team, you might not have a lot of flexibility. And so if your mind is more passive, I need to be passive, but I want my money to be growing, that's on one side of the spectrum. And then the other side of the spectrum is being very, very active, always kind of following the news, always following the trends, making trades very frequently. So where do you fit on that spectrum? Where does your schedule allow you to be on that spectrum? So once we have a better idea of how much time you have, how much cash you have, and your risk tolerance, then we can maybe start to figure out something more suitable for your own brokerage, for your own goals going forward. And major step number 3 is to think about your goals and where you want your investments to take you. So if you're expecting some major expenses on the horizon, some examples could be going to college, getting married, or like a wedding, getting a house, getting a car, things like that. These are things that you might set up in your mind as a goal for your investing. I think for a lot of us, especially as we get older, retirement or just getting up to, for example, $1 million or up to $2 million or up to $3 million so that we can retire is another goal that you can set. Where do you want your investments to take you and what time horizon is associated with that? And so that takes me into number 2, preparing for retirement. All of us have different amounts of time left until retirement, but it's clear that we probably should all be preparing for retirement, whether you're paying into Social Security or not. Different people live in different countries and have different needs. Here in Japan, we pay into it, but they're already starting to teach us the system might not be around in a few years, so you guys should probably save up a lot for retirement. And growing up in the US, it was kind of like that as well. So having that on your mind, preparing for that. In Japan, they say try to have $250,000 saved by the time you retire to supplement the little bit that the government's going to be able to give you. And for a lot of people, that's not very realistic without investing. In the US, especially if you're in a higher cost of living area, that number is going to be much higher, probably 8 or 10 times higher than that. But as I mentioned earlier, if you don't have much time until you need to get to that goal, you either need to think about, am I going to be really, really risk averse? Am I going to avoid all risks so that I can turn my $100,000 into $120,000 so that I can have that extra 20 grand for retirement? Or are you going to think, I got 10 years until retirement, I have 100 grand now, how can I YOLO the crap out of this to turn it into $1 million in 10 years? And these will dictate the strategies and the investment vehicles that you use to get there based on your risk tolerance. And then step number 3 is to remember that our goals and our needs will certainly change. For me, I've been married 10 years now, and our financial situation has changed drastically in these 10 years, let alone 15 or 20 years back. But even in these 5 years, our needs and expectations and goals have changed a lot as well. And so it's important to be flexible. And I think along with that, it's really important for us to have a humble learning attitude going into this, because every single trade you make, every single gain or loss you make, you're going to be learning something. And based on the things that you learn, you're going to eventually build up a set of rules in your mind. And these rules cost a lot in terms of maybe money, but also in terms of time and effort put into, going through those lessons, but they'll often end up paying really, really large dividends going into the future. And one bonus tip to go along with that is don't be afraid to ask questions. I had a guy ask me in the comment section, dude, if this stock's worth $5 and that stock's worth $1, but the one that's worth $5 doesn't make as much money as the one that's worth $1, how is that okay? And I basically explained market cap to him. These companies' values are very different because the number of shares they're offering is very different. Don't be afraid to ask questions, whether it's down here in the comments section or picking up a book. I've listed a bunch of books down in the description that have helped me learn a lot too. I should also mention Dave Ramsey's Total Money Makeover, if step number 1 especially is where you're at in your financial journey. I'll put a link down in the description for you for that. But like anything, like any business, like starting a YouTube channel, like anything, just getting started, pushing yourself to take that first step is the hardest part. So I encourage you guys to do that. I know a lot of you guys already on this channel have been investing for years. I'm very thankful for your feedback all the time. Let me know if there are things that you're also kind of like, man, I really need to figure out this one thing about investing that I've never understood, and maybe we can talk about those things as well. Thank you guys very much for your time. Have a great one.